In the waning years of the 14th century, in a stone manor nestled within the walls of a bustling English town, lived Islay, a young woman of 20 summers. Her world was one of strict order and unyielding expectation. Her parents, Lord and Lady Harrow, were wealthy merchants whose fortune bought them a seat at the fringes of nobility. For Islay, this meant a life of fine wool gowns and lessons in Latin, but also a future already written in ink, a marriage to a widowed baron twice her age. Islay's most prized possession was a frock of a rare and delicate pink. In an age when clothing was a direct mirror of social status and wealth, such a color was a luxury. Pink dye, derived from expensive madder root and mixed with costly white cloth, was a subtle but powerful declaration of her family's standing. She wore it not for vanity, but as a quiet rebellion, a splash of softness in a world of hard edges. Her heart, however, belonged to Liam, the earnest apprentice to the town's blacksmith. Their meetings were stolen in the shadowed corners of the market square or behind the abbey's herb garden. He spoke of a life beyond the town walls, in a free port where a man's worth was in his skill, not his bloodline. To Islay, it sounded like freedom. One moonless night, driven by desperation and a love she believed was worth any risk, Islay slipped from her chamber. She wore her pink frock, as if to carry a piece of her old life into the new one she was building. They fled into the forest, their hopes as fragile as the dawn. But their freedom was short-lived. By midday, her father's men, tipped off by a watchful servant, found them huddled by a stream. The consequences of a noble daughter's elopement were severe. It was not merely disobedience, but a crime against the family's honor and social contract. Liam was dragged away, his fate uncertain. Islay was returned home not as a daughter, but as a prisoner. Her parents' fury was cold and absolute. To protect their reputation, they could not risk public scandal. The common punishments for such transgressions, public shaming or head shaving, were unthinkable for a girl of their station. Instead, they chose a quieter, more absolute form of control. Islay was locked in her room, the heavy oak door barred from the outside. Her windows were shuttered, her pink frock confiscated, and her meals passed through a slot in the door. She was to remain there until she accepted her betrothal, or until she was sent to a distant convent to live out her days in silent penance, a fate suffered by other noblewomen who defied their families. Inside a cold stone chamber lit by a single candle, the young woman kneels on a wooden stool, still wearing her pink kirtle, now slightly rumpled and pulled up at the back to expose her undergarments, a simple linen chemise. Her light brown hair is loose, strands falling over her flushed face as she grips the stool's edge. Behind her, an older noblewoman in a dark green wool surcoat over a kirtle, white wimple, and gold brooch holds a slender birch cane in one hand, her expression stern but sorrowful. A heavy oak door with iron hinges stands closed in the background, and a barred window casts long shadows across the floor, signaling both the physical and emotional confinement that follows the punishment. She argued not with tears, but with logic. She would accept a marriage, but only if it was to a man of her choosing, or if she was granted a role in managing the family's trade, a path that would keep her in the world, not remove her from it. Her persistence, coupled with her mother's quiet intervention, eventually wore down her father's resolve. A compromise was struck. Liam would be released and allowed to leave the town, his life spared. Islay would not marry the baron, but would instead enter the local abbey not as a penitent, but as a lay sister, managing its accounts and its charitable works. It was not the wild freedom she had dreamed of. But it was a life of purpose on her own terms. On the morning of her departure for the abbey, her mother returned the pink frock. Islay dressed slowly, the soft fabric a familiar comfort against her skin. She was no longer a runaway, but a woman who had faced the walls of her world and found a door.